talking about the path of the self, which has to be birthed through the ego. So we cannot eliminate the ego.
Right.
And then that can only happen through a transformation of the ego.
Yes.
Otherwise, before that transformation, the ego is just in a war.
Yeah.
And then we have to like transcend that war.
Right.
And
right. So the essence is that the ego is of course, when the ego is in charge, solely in charge, the ego is totally ignorant of the whole, and then creates a separation and isolation, and then becomes like totally deaf to any kind of a feedback to its own deceptiveness. But the surrender of the ego cannot happen in terms of like the extinction of the individual. And as I said, then what we find is then a kind of a relapse into a form of socialism or a form of a dictatorship of the collective. But if we were to continue the journey of the self, ego integrating itself into a greater whole, then we get the birth of the self with the capital S, which is not a self that is like the opposite of the collective. And this is very fundamental, because this issue is like haunts us, because this is why you get a swing either towards individualistic capitalism or collectivistic socialism. But the self with the capital S does not see itself as loose from the whole. You see, and then you have, as long as you keep juxtaposing, you are stuck in the level of the ego, no matter how you claim to not be. But the self does not experience a world of opposites in terms of antagonistic opposites. So the self with a capital S is not the opposite of the collective. So the individual, the real individual, and the collective are not opposites. They are not mutually exclusive. So then there is not a surrender to some external general interest at the cost of the individual. Then there is an individuality within a general care for everything and everyone. They do not exclude each other. And we know that the current system of the current political system is, of course, is built on that seeming contradiction, and it's not. The paradox is that the two connect, the two are sustained by the paradox.
If you can tolerate it.
Yes, if you can tolerate the necessary evils of the ego, then transcend to a level of self-consciousness, understanding this field mechanism of compensation, which gives birth to the self, the whole self. And that self is a organic part of a tribal collective unconscious, and they feed and they sustain each other. A group without a self becomes a mob. The group and the self are the building blocks of a healthy system. Too much self in the ego leads to self-interest, but too much collective leads to sects, cults, and a kind of a dictatorial socialism. The self, the integrated self, does not experience the collective as a opposite, antagonist.
It's a kind of a paradox that the ego has to become collective.
Right.
While the ego experiences everything is separate.
Right.
It has to become a collective.
The rebirth of the ego as the self is a collective individual, and that's the paradox.
Right.
And the paradox is the only container of truth. The collective individual is the individual that is also, you see, then I am everything. I am the tree. I am the all for one and one for all implies not only one for all, but also all for one.
Right.
So then I am the whole. And then we find the concept that we are this collective individual. This planet is an individual, and it's still a collective. And we are busy giving birth to that collective individual, where I am me and I'm also you, and I'm also the planet, but it is an individual. It's not a mob, it's not a collective against an individual. How can it be how can the individual not be the collective? How can we not listen to every individual voice?
But how can we?
Right, but the ego, the problem of this extreme ego is that the other members of the house are not listened to. And then you get this new world order-ish system that wants to control the whole from a centralized point. But the real idea of democracy is the idea of this diversity, where every part gets a say, and not one against the other, and that gives birth to a new consciousness, a collective individual consciousness. And then we celebrate the individual as perhaps something that hasn't ever been present, because we know we come from these tribal, indigenous cultures which were beautiful, but which were not conscious in the individual sense. And we celebrate the collective, the planet, as us, as the whole, you see, and only that is sustainable. No system where the collective dominates the individual will be sustainable, and no system where the individuals dominate the collective will be sustainable. And that's the paradox. We need to understand the paradox.